Did you know that one of the first Christian critiques of Islam was written just decades after its creation? Problems at the heart of Islam, which remain unanswered to this day, were brought forth in the 8th century by a man named St. John of Damascus. Damesene was a Christian monk who lived under the rule of the Umayyad Caliphate throughout the entire 8th century. This wasn't just a modern polemic where the Muslim can just claim to be a victim of 20th century critical thinking and research, but actually a critique of the unorthodox doctrine and belief system that St. John lived under for most of his life. In this video, we're going to explore exactly what John of Damascus said about Islam and why he outright rejected its claims in his writing Fount of Knowledge. So let's start off with what St. John said about the very roots of Islam, which gives us some historical insight into where it is that it actually came from. This is what he says. There is also the superstition of the Ishmaelites, which to this day prevails and keeps people in error, being a forerunner of the Antichrist. These used to be idolaters and worshipped the morning star and Aphrodite, whom in their own language they call Kaaba, which means great. And so down to the time of Heretical, they were very great idolaters. From that time to the present, a false prophet named Muhammad has appeared in their midst. St. John simply saw Islam as a superstition amongst the Ishmaelites where the Son, Jesus Christ, was denied. These people had notoriously worshipped pagan gods, and from them is where Muhammad came. Then he says this man, Muhammad, after having chanced upon the Old and New Testaments and likewise, it seems, having conversed with an Arian monk, devised his own heresy. He didn't fully understand the Old and the New Testament that he had been taught, especially as he had been taught by a heretic. Arianism was a condemned Christian heresy at the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, where a group came forward within the church who denied the divinity of Christ. Was this Arian monk Damascus speaks of potentially Waraka, who'd been the one to convince Muhammad that he was a prophet, whilst he was sure that he had been possessed by a demon? Maybe he was the one who taught Muhammad about the Injil and Torah. Damesene then goes on to say the following about Muhammad. Then, having insinuated himself into the good graces of the people by a show of seeming piety, he gave out that a certain book had been sent down to him from heaven. Now, this next part I'm going to show you, John of Damascus touches on a point which should be extremely eye-opening for the Muslim. There are many other extraordinary and quite ridiculous things in this book which he boasts was sent down to him from God. But when we ask, and who is there to testify that God gave him the book, and which of the prophets foretold that such a prophet would rise up? They are at a loss. And we remark that Moses received the law on Mount Sinai, with God appearing in the sight of all people in cloud and fire and darkness and storm. And we say that all the prophets from Moses on down foretold the coming of Christ, and how Christ, God, and incarnate Son of God, was to come and to be crucified and die and rise again. Then we say, how is it that this prophet of yours did not come in the same way, with others bearing witness to him? And how is it that God did not, in your presence, present this man with the book to which you refer, even as he gave the law to Moses, with the people looking on and the mountain smoking, so that you too might have certainty? And they answer that God does as he pleases. This is mental though, because we have the exact same unanswered questions today. Where is Muhammad spoken of through prophecy, without you using some genuine crazy mental gymnastics to get there? Who is it that validated Muhammad's encounters with the angel? Was anyone there? Who is it that was given word by God that Muhammad would be given a new revelation and a book from him? Who bore witness historically to Muhammad's prophethood? Here's what John of Damascus continues to say. When we ask again, how is it that when he enjoined us in this book of yours not to do anything or receive anything without witness, you did not ask him? First, do you show us by witnesses that you are a prophet and that you have come from God, and show us just what scriptures there are that testify about you? They, referring to the Muslims, are ashamed and remain silent. Although you may not marry a wife without witness or buy or acquire property, although you neither receive an ass nor possess a beast of burden unwitnessed, and although you do possess both wives and property and assess and so on through witnesses, yet it is only your faith and your scriptures that you hold unsubstantiated by witness. For he who handed this down to you has no warranty from any source, nor is there anyone known who testified about him before he came. Damascus makes a great point here, mate. Everything by the people of Islam is done with and by witness. Yet these same people who follow Muhammad decided that the very prophet they hang their eternity on can be without witness. I'll repeat the last sentence of this section by St. John again. Yet it is only your faith and your scriptures that you hold unsubstantiated by witness. For he who handed down to you has no warranty from any source, nor is there anyone known who testified about him before he came. It's crazy when you think about it. Many Muslims ask for and are presented with literal witness of Christ's divinity from scriptures even predating him, from church history, writings from the apostles, hundreds of messianic prophecies, and even his own words which testify of him as the Son of God. Yet they reject him. Yet there is no standard or requirement for a witness or testification of the prophethood of Muhammad, who is never mentioned by previous scriptures, prophets, or God directly. So let's see what else Damascus had to say specifically about these, in his own words, extraordinary and quite ridiculous things in the book which Muhammad boasts was sent down to him from God. In this instance, let's look at what he says specifically about the crucifixion. And he, being Muhammad, says that the Jews wanted to crucify him, being Jesus, in violation of the law, and that they seized his shadow and crucified this. But the Christ himself was not crucified. He, Muhammad, says, nor did he die, for God out of his love for him took him to himself into heaven. Here again, St. John of Damascus is probably referring to 4:157 of the Quran, which says, and because of their saying, we slew the Messiah, Jesus son of Mary, Allah's messenger, they slew him not, nor crucified him, but it only appeared so unto them. Right, we all know that God gave us brains to think, to use critical thinking, and to also use the evidence that he's left us. Even 2,000 years later, it's pretty much considered a historical fact that a man named Jesus was crucified, whether you believe that he's the Son of God or not. Whether we use evidence from anti-Christian historians, Romans and Jews, such as Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, or Lucian of Samosata. Or we could just use the thousands of external biblical sources from church fathers, apostles of Jesus' companions, or church writings and manuscripts. The crucifixion from a common sense and logical standpoint is undeniable. The Muslim in general will just say that Allah made it appear that Jesus was crucified, which is why people of the time believed it, which supports the Quran. It doesn't actually go against it. But this is just such a weak argument. Bro, it's like me telling you that this YouTube video isn't real. It's just been made to appear as if it is. So any evidence that you give me for this video being real actually supports my position, and it's therefore impossible for you to disprove my standpoint. It's tier 1 gaslighting, and an absolutely ridiculous position to hold to. There's no evidence that it was anyone other than Jesus who was crucified. Moreover, every piece of evidence which remains shows us that it was in fact him. Like, just think about that for a second, right? Everyone thinks it's Jesus, but God just makes him disappear at some point and just deceives everyone for the next 600 years for no reason apart from inshallah. Look, this writing from St. John of Damascus is pretty long, so for time's sake, I'll read just one more part, which doesn't need much explaining, but it is fantastic. It's concerning the Kaaba in Mecca. They furthermore accuse us of being idolaters because we venerate the cross, which they abominate. And we answer them, how is it then that you rub yourselves against a stone in your Kaaba and kiss and embrace it? Then some of them say that Abraham had relations with Agar upon it, but others say that he tied the camel to it when he was going to sacrifice Isaac. Then we say, let it be Abraham's, as you so foolishly say. Just because Abraham had relations with a woman on it, or tied a camel to it, you're not ashamed to kiss it, yet you blame us for venerating the cross of Christ, by which the power of the demons and the deceit of the devil was destroyed. This stone that they talk about is a head of the Aphrodite whom they, the Ishmaelites, used to worship and whom they called Kaaba. Even to this present day, traces of the carving are visible on it to careful observers. This does interest me a lot, yeah. How often do we hear Muslims accuse Catholics and Orthodox Christians of idol worship when venerating the very word of God, Jesus Christ, the cross, and looking upon the saints who the Spirit of God lived through? Yet the Muslim will spend their life savings to circle a rock which has pagan roots, to rub, kiss and worship it, whilst at the same time praying to Muhammad. Anyway, there's a lot more that John of Damascus goes into, so I'll leave a link to the writing in the description. But I wanted to present some of what he said in a video, as the opinion of a man who lived in the midst of the birth and spread of Islam. So with the current trends going around online at the moment with Muslims worshipping the same God or Muslims worshipping a different God as Christians, I think it's good to think of Islam as Damascus explains it. Simply a heretical superstition and delusion brought about by a man who rose up from a pagan culture and was taught the Bible by a heretic, without even reading it himself, being that he is illiterate. This man Muhammad then wrote a book based on his own understanding, taking snippets of different cultures and religious stances and filling it with illogical Christological errors which remain unanswered to this day, whilst his apparent prophethood stands alone, never predicted, never prophesied and never confirmed.